Raising boys can be tougher than most things in life and may very well be one of the hardest tasks a parent can be faced with. In the time of growing atrocities against women, from domestic violence to femicide and other vicious violations, how do we raise responsible generation of men who will challenge and change this narrative? Here to talk to us about how parents can assist in fighting toxic masculinity at grassroots is clinical psychologist Sikander Kalla. Welcome to The Loft.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sikander, male children are often taught and encouraged to be tough in their approach to various situations from a young age in comparison to female children. Now, how does this impact on the kind of men they become later in society?
Well, essentially, then what we're speaking about in that specific format is we're saying socialization plays a big role in how we raise our children. And I think one of the key things we can look at specifically when raising boy children is, are we pushing them in a direction of hegemonic masculinity, which is essentially the predominant form of masculinity that says these are the parameters that define what a boy and what a man should be within our social and cultural context. And essentially, one then has to subscribe to that or feel some potential fear of exclusion or actually be excluded. So we almost set up an expectation and force individuals to fulfill that expectation with the threat of them being excluded should that not materialize.
Now then, how does this form of parenting style lend itself to toxic masculinity at a later stage in the boy's life?
Well, I think if you think specifically of hegemonic masculinity, what are the key qualities that come into play when we think of hegemonic masculinity? We think that boys men should be strong, should never cry, shouldn't show emotions, they should be dominant, they should be assertive, physically and otherwise. And essentially then what we end up doing is saying that this is what determines your level of competence as a man. And whenever that is being challenged, there's a retaliation, there's a defensiveness that kicks in. And that defensiveness is, I need to restore that sense of competence again. I need to restore that sense of manhood. And sometimes that can manifest in ways that come with transgressing the boundaries of what is healthy with our counterparts, because we have to conform and we have to assert that competence no matter the cost. So it really sets up individuals to almost find themselves in situations where even if they're not aware of it consciously, subconsciously there's always a power struggle to reassert that predominant form of manhood.
And it's this behavior, with so much ill treatment and violence towards women by men in our society today, how important is it for parents to start educating their boy on how to treat their female counterparts from an early age?
I think the first thing to do would be able to unlearn and relearn from a parent's perspective, because often what is being passed on is also things that need to be unlearned and relearned, because we sometimes may be able to pass on things that are familiar but perhaps not the most healthy. We were raised in that specific way, that's familiar to us, that's how it's always been, and we then just repeat the cycle. So I think first and foremost we need to step back, we need to say to ourselves, okay, is there certain things that I need to unlearn? Can I relearn them? When I've relearned them in the correct way, then let me focus on passing that down. And what must come into play there is self-awareness, self-insight, to say what certain strings are being pulled at, what am I unaware of, what are my blind spots that trigger me in a particular way to retaliate in a defensive manner.
How important is it for parents to be exemplary within the household in ways in which they treat each other, especially around the children?
Well, it's extremely important, and that's why I stress the point of self-awareness, because you're essentially the blueprint for your child, and they're going to try and form some form of resonance and emulate what you are teaching them. So I think from a social learning perspective, we learn a lot of behaviors in our childhood, and we take that with us and continue to, in almost a way in which we don't critically engage with it, we just continue to manifest those particular cycles.
A lot of parents say, do as I say and not as I do. But here we need to remember that children are sponges. So they see behavior, and here is exactly where now actions do speak louder than words.
Indeed. And that hypocrisy can quickly be picked up on quite intuitively, that your actions speak louder than your words. And I think it's so important in those moments to be able to say, I'm going to be a representative of how I want my child to essentially develop. And if you're not a good representation of that, verbally and non-verbally, you're setting yourself up for failure.
So then how important is the role of a father in shaping a boy child's character?
I think if you think of what hegemonic masculinity entails, it's essentially passing down predominant forms of masculinity frameworks. In that regard, the child will gravitate to the same sex and say, hey, I'm a boy, I'm a male, I want to resonate with another male. I want to find that form of a patriarchal figure that gives me the guidelines and the frameworks. And I think it's difficult in South Africa where we have single parent households where many of us are raised by grandmothers and what have you. It becomes difficult on how do we then find some masculine presence that we can emulate in quite a healthy way. And that's when we see individuals going to other figures that may not be able to teach them in the best ways possible. And that's where peer pressure comes into play as well. So I think having a solid foundation on how you want to project yourself, on how you want to represent yourself, on what your identity means, what are your blind spots, that needs to be emulated from someone that you can resonate with.
Sikander, this is such a valuable conversation, but we need to also put our money where our mouth is. So what are practical tips that parents out there, and fathers specifically, can practice and use when raising the boy child?
I would say the most useful one is to actually say, we're living fast-paced lives. We're living, lives in which we're constantly moving from one thing to the other and juggling so many roles and responsibilities that we never actually take the time to sit down, reflect, do some deep introspection and say, hey, when I'm doing the stock taking, are things really adding up? Is this the sort of parental figure that I want to be? Or is there a few things that I can work on? Because essentially we're not asking for perfection. We're asking for just heading in the right direction. And I think one of the easiest practical steps is taking time to reflect, sitting back. You don't need anything fancy, just need to sit back, take the time to reflect, identify those blind spots that I've been speaking about quite a bit, identify what you need to unlearn, what you need to relearn, and then when you've actually conceptualized that, you're able to then put that into practice.
It's very interesting, Sikander, how much self-work goes into raising another self, another human being. Thank you for reminding us here that it is as important to give equal attention to the boy child and the girl child from grassroots level. Cheers.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
There's a proverb that says, groom them whilst they're still young. And this may just be the big difference we so desperately need in fighting against gender-based violence.